Welcome, travelers, champions, heroes, and villains, to the adventure. So now you all know the beginning of the adventure of Jalad the Dragonborn Ranger, how he was looking for some answers into a creature from his past. And the first session I ever ran started to lay the groundwork for where that creature was, or at the very least an area where it had been. There were, and still are, many more adventures for Jalad going on to this very day. That intro story, though, will always hold a bit of a special place in my heart. Not because it was some grand story, intricately planned out, with perfectly placed and played out battle encounters. No. That'd be one of the most unsustainable lies I've ever told. Instead, I really enjoy that story because it was the first one I ever did, and because it taught me more than reading all the guides and watching all the videos could ever teach me about a very important skill for a dungeon master: flexibility. I honestly had no real frame of reference on how to run a Dungeons & Dragons game, other than what I'd heard and seen from other videos and stories on the internet. Other than a small encounter with a tabletop gaming years ago. It's super easy to think of things to do when you're watching someone else playing it out on the internet, or a story that's already happened. Hey Mercer, fool, you clearly should have thought of this perfect idea in the moment that I had been mulling over for a week in my shower thoughts. It doesn't really cut it when you're thinking of what you have planned already, while your characters are doing literally everything you have never planned for. So now you're doing 30 rewrites in your head as you throw a random goblin at the characters to have them roll initiative and take a few minutes on combat to slow down the pace. Because you have to think of what's going to happen when the party thinks they're going to unmask a hag in a city, only for it to actually be a pair of criminals that the party was working with earlier in the campaign, and they have alerted the most powerful guardians of the city to the fact that there's probably a hag. But no, it's actually our criminal associates that the city is on the lookout for after they accidentally knocked a couple of rows of audience members into a dinosaur fighting arena, where they were promptly killed. I'm sure that exact scenario has occurred to everyone at some point in time, really. The amount of strings a DM has to keep track of is quite staggering when you first leap into it, and it only adds more strings upon strings as a campaign continues on because there are always new NPCs, new locations, new monsters, bigger, badder evil guys, or the BBEG just gets more power and you have to keep up with the motivations. All while expanding on backgrounds and desires the characters have. Honestly, thinking about it all, I don't know how anyone can get it done, let alone myself with my distracted mind half the time. Kobolds get distracted by shiny things quite frequently. The easiest thing to do to keep this monstrosity of convoluted ideas and opinions is writing it down. But that sounds like a whole bunch of work. Well, yes, it is some work. It's not necessarily a whole bunch of work, unless you're a super world builder that has everything planned out to the max, in which case, you know what you signed up for. Don't get mad at me over it. What I do over the course of a week, or however long I have between gaming sessions, is come up with some ideas of where the characters are going to be. There are usually only a few options of where the party will actually go, or things that will happen in a given session. Are they going to go to a dungeon or try to locate the new MacGuffin, return to a quest giver NPC, investigate a nearby storyline, or follow the breadcrumb trail to the next plotline? I don't do marathon all-day sessions, so usually that's all a party's really going to end up doing in a given 3 or 4 hour session. Especially if there's combat sprinkled in. Oh god, especially if there's combat sprinkled in. So all you really have to outline on a week-to-week basis is what they're likely to encounter in the dungeon, what their reward is, or where they're going to. Because in all honesty, the majority of what occurs will be improvised in the moment. You can write down what info an NPC knows, but you can't guess how the players are going to try and extract that information. So you have to make up the conversations on the fly. That's where the flexibility occurs most often, because PCs won't talk to the person that knows where they need to go next, or won't think to ask that specific question. Or they end up just pissing off the NPC so much that they don't want to talk to him anymore anyways. So, guess what? Looks like the other person in the tavern that thought that conversation they just had was hilarious, and they actually know more about what the party needs to find. So, they have info that they were trying to locate as well. Maybe they even know more, or maybe they have less useful information, depending upon how you wish to toss consequences to the party. Perhaps they have to pay for the information because they're intimidating too many quest givers, or they get expanded information because the group helped lighten up the mood of a really dark campaign. Mostly what I want to hammer into your minds of those watching is that no matter how airtight you think you have your campaign, how willing your players are to follow the tracks of your railroad, something will always inevitably not go the way you planned out. Because the dice were super hot or cold. And mostly because the other players aren't you. They won't think like you. They won't behave like you want them to. And that's a great thing. That's what drives the story and makes for those memorable moments. Someone has to pay the cost for harboring criminals in the city. Someone had to know they were there, and someone will be found out, and they will be punished for it. Because ultimately, that's what will keep your Dungeons & Dragons game, or any tabletop game for that matter, continuing on and on. It's conflict and resolution. And the best ones can't be planned for. So, be flexible, my friends. And I will see you all again in the next adventure.